this journey is a journey and you have to keep going. So, in order to have endurance to live the life that you want to live, you need to be okay. You need to learn to be okay with the season that you're in. And not just okay, you need to then learn how to enjoy it, to embrace it, to find those tiny joys, those tiny moments every single day in your routine that are enough. Because if it's constantly this big, flashy thing, you're going to get burned out.
My guest today is a dear friend of mine.
One of them goes, that one over there, she's big money. And it was my guest today.
Her name is Amy Porterfield.
Amy Porterfield, the ever amazing,
best-selling author of 2 Weeks Notice, Miss Amy Porterfield.
It was 2012 when I first realized I have built a business that I hate. I was about 2 years into building the business I have today, and I looked around and I thought, hold on. I feel like I've been sold a lie because this is way harder than I thought it was going to be, way more time, effort, work, stress, energy. And I didn't think it was supposed to be that way. And at that time, what I did is I learned the art of less is more. That was the year that I said, wait, instead of having all these different offers, instead of having my hands in a million different things, I'm going to do just a few things really well. And again, do less and crossing my fingers that I could actually make more. And it worked. That year, I did the least I've ever done since when I had started the business a few years before, and I made more money. And something clicked for me. I thought, holy cow, I got to figure this out and continue this. And along my next, 14 years after that, I've done a good job of staying with less is more, except sometimes I get off track. And I'll find myself back in that moment where I'm like, whoa, I've added too much. This has gotten a little crazy. I'm starting to dip into working nights again, or in my case, working Fridays because we don't here. And so when I see that happening, I look around and I think, where did I fall into the more is more trap? And it's a big red flag for me. And I got to kind of pull myself back, clean some things up, reset essentially. And so I've done that multiple times. I think if you're an achiever like me, you're going to vacillate between right on track, less is more, you're in the zone, things start to kind of take over, big opportunities come your way, and all of a sudden more is more and you hate it. And then you got to kind of reset and come back. So if you can relate to any of this, I'm glad you're here today, because if you're listening, you're likely building your own business online. And that means that you've stepped outside of the status quo. Like, right? We're doing things that most people would never do. And you might even be building something that doesn't really make sense on paper, but it makes perfect sense in your gut. So you've dared to believe that success can look different than the traditional 9 to 5. And that's a big deal. The fact that you even have taken that leap and you're in it now, you are a very low percent of the population, right? You're special. I'm just going to say you're special. And it comes with a lot of special challenges that you have to navigate. So my guest today is Morgan DeBaun, and she isn't just rewriting her own rules for what success looks like. She's helping a whole generation of women to do the same. So she's built a media company that reaches over 100 million people every single month. And she's launched brands like Afrotech and 2190 and Traveling Noir. And she's raised millions in funding, all while staying deeply grounded in her mission and in her values, and now her voice as an author. So her new book, Rewrite the Rules, is one of the most honest, practical, freeing guide that I've read in a very long time. It's not about hustling harder. It's about getting radically clear on what you're actually here to do and building a business and a life that honors that. It's just a different way to look at it. So if you've ever felt like you're maybe outgrowing the business that you initially built, or that success was costing you way more than you were willing to pay for, if you've ever had that moment, I absolutely have, then this episode is for you. It's that reset that you've been needing. So let's get to it. We were talking off camera that we both are in Tennessee from California. So, we're like the total cliche, right?
We are.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't tell people I'm from California and Tennessee because they're like, you're the one who brought all the people over here. Thanks for nothing.
Yes, we're sorry for bringing private equity with us.
Exactly. So sorry. But I have been really looking forward to chatting with you because everything that your message is everything that my audience absolutely will eat up and they need to hear. So I kind of wanted to start with talking about seasons of life because you're in a beautiful season of life. You've got a new baby, you're newly married, you're a CEO, now the author of this incredible book, which has been incredibly popular, Rewrite Your Rules. So we're going to talk about that. But talk to me about seasons of life. Why are they so important to pay attention to? And what does yours look like right now?
Yeah, seasons of life and understanding what season you're in and then accepting that is one of the best ways to manage your stress and to make sure that you feel joyful in whatever it is that you're doing in the present moment. I think society tries to teach us that we should be constantly looking for the next thing. We should be constantly, you have a baby and someone's like, when are you going to have another baby? And you get married, but when are you going to get pregnant? And it's a constant pressure to continue to get to the next milestone. And I think that for me, I learned I was pretty successful early on. I started my company when I was 24 and I really followed that advice. Like it was just constant fundraise, raise money from venture capitalists, buy a company, buy another company. And it felt like I could never do enough to even satisfy myself, right? Forget everybody else. Even for myself, I wasn't satisfied. So it wasn't until I was able to actually slow down and say, hey, this journey is a journey and you have to keep going. So, in order to have endurance to live the life that you want to live, you need to be okay. You need to learn to be okay with the season that you're in. And not just okay, you need to then learn how to enjoy it, to embrace it, to find those tiny joys, those tiny moments every single day in your routine that are enough. Because if it's constantly this big, flashy thing, you're going to get burned out.
Yes. We talk a lot about what is enough on the show. And do you mind sharing how old you are now?
Yeah, I'm 35,
35. And you started when you were, what, 24, you said?
24. It's 11 years in
Okay.
business.
So and you've had a really cool trajectory to get to where you are. Tell us just like a quick snapshot about kind of what your trajectory looked like.
Yeah, so I'm a Midwest girly. I went to school in St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis. Graduated, moved to Silicon Valley, worked there for 2 years, and very quickly realized I got to get out. Okay, I had to give my notice, as you would
Yes.
say.
Yes.
And but I loved the idea of Silicon Valley of like building products for millions and billions of people and using technology to do that. No one was building that for me, and no one was building that for women and people of color. So that was the beginning of Blavity. Over the course of 10 years, I've raised over $12 million. We've had as many as 150, 200 employees, huge, beautiful offices in downtown LA, acquired 3 companies and done M&A and flipped those businesses to grow them and scale them. So I've done a lot. Then I said, enough is enough. I got to take care of me. And that's when I relocated to Tennessee and moved here to Nashville, which has a slower pace of life, but still a lot of ambition in this city. And I've really enjoyed that transition. But I think I did have 10 years of momentum behind me in order to be able to switch seasons and slow down a bit.
Okay, so that's what I want to talk about. Do you feel as though from 24 to where you are now, along the way, have you kind of figured out what your enough is? And if so, like, how did you get there?
Yeah, my enough is I've got a few different definitions of enough for me. One is owning my time and how I spend it and who I spend it with. When you're working in a corporate environment, you actually don't really own your time. You're trading your time for, the transaction of this direct deposit that comes every 2 weeks, which is quite lovely, for
Yes.
many, many
Yes.
people.
Love the
But
security. Yeah.
yeah, we love the security. I don't think everybody's made to be an entrepreneur, but that is a transaction. That is a trade-off. And you don't have the freedom, and I became an entrepreneur because I wanted the freedom to build and spend the majority of my time building and putting things back into the world that I felt like were meaningful. There is a moment in an entrepreneur's life, though, Amy, where you then start taking on other roles as a CEO that you're like, and you've talked about this on the show before, where you're like, wait, payroll, HR, legal. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't sign up for this. Okay. Like I signed up to be the visionary, the founder, the person creating all the cool things, you know, the hoorah, the cheerleader. I didn't sign up to be the bad guy. And I'm the bad guy. And there was, many years that I felt like I was the only person who could make tough decisions for the company. It was my responsibility. And that was hard for me, so I had to figure out a way to allow myself to be happy and joyous and to be able to get out of that mindset of like, this is a burden when actually it is a privilege to lead the company that I leave.
Yes, for sure. So when you kind of transition, like, wait a second, this is such a privilege. Did it kind of get clear about these are my goals and this is enough for me? And sure, I want a lot, but I don't need to keep grinding and hustling because the season of life you're in right now, grinding and hustling, it doesn't really go with that.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that there's a lot of external things that I was like aiming for a number in the bank account, a certain valuation or thing that I wanted to raise money for. Being able to walk the red carpet in LA with all these celebrities and have this perception of photo shoots. You hire the photographer, the fake paparazzi person to take photos of you, and that all of this stuff. And what I realized was that that actually did not equate to joy and happiness for me. It might have made other people happy, but it didn't make me happy. What makes me happy is like waking up and having a cup of coffee and going for a walk. What makes me happy is being able to have dinner with my mom and dad, and them being 10 minutes away instead of being hour flights away. It, just the small things. And those are things that were actually more in my control. Right. And I think that it's going to be different for everybody else. I mean, that's why I wrote this book, was to help people figure out for themselves what is enough for them, what is success for them, what rules do they need to rewrite for themselves. Now, financially, Amy, it's been interesting because sometimes when you make these adjustments, you actually wind up making more money.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. It's the law of the universe, but like that's also has been true for me when I took myself off the rat race and I actually made myself less available. I was able to demand higher prices for brand deals, for our company, for all types of things. And that has been really rewarding as well.
Yeah, I love that. I want to actually talk about that, but I'm going to put a pin in that because I want you to back us up a little bit. In your book, you talk about these 6 life pillars. So I was hoping you could walk us through each one of them and really what they represent and how someone might use them as a compass for making more aligned choices in their life and in their business.
Yeah. So the 6 life pillars are basically pillars that I've created and that I've lived by to say, look, these are kind of the 6 fundamentals of life. You can only do 3 out of the 6 at any given point. So the 6 pillars, you can't do everything, right? So the 6 pillars are wellness, passions, relationships, money, stability, and freedom. These are really important. So let's start with freedom and stability. So you want to work for yourself, freedom. You want to direct deposit every 2 weeks, stability. That could be tough in the beginning. Those could be 2 tough pillars to pick in the beginning. So there's some pillars that don't make sense at different seasons of life, and you have to fluctuate them. I'm pregnant right now with my second child, so wellness is a pillar. Whether I like it or not, this baby is coming. Okay, so she is on the way, and
Oh, it's a girl.
it's a girl.
Congrats.
We're so excited. So I have to do certain things. I got to go to a doctor's appointment every month. I have to make sure I'm eating well. I have to make sure that I'm working out. There are things that make this pillar one of the 3. And if not, there will be consequences physically, mentally, and that's important to accept, right? You can't fight some of the fundamentals of life in the seasons that you're in. And I think that for a lot of people, what happens is they say, I want it all, Amy. They say, I want all 6 pillars to be a 10 out of 10 in every single one of them. I want to be financially stable. I want to have the freedom to work on the beach and work remotely. I also want to have a bomb relationship with my partner. And then when they fall short, they're like, oh, it feels like I'm trying really hard and I'm not able to make progress. And so what I recommend in the book and what I talk to people about is pick 3 at any point that you're working on. The other 3 can be in maintenance mode, but pick 3 that are your priority pillars right now. and accept the season of life that you're in.
So that reminds me, something when I used to work for Tony Robbins that he teaches is, and you might disagree with this, so I want to know, he would say sometimes when, let's say, you're thriving in business, it's pretty common that your personal life might be a little bit shaky, might be a little bit neglected. Or when your marriage is so freaking good and you're madly in love, your health might be suffering just a little bit because you're cozy and those workouts aren't as important anymore because cuddling on the couches or whatever. With these pillars, do you see that sometimes happening where if you're focusing on these three, you might not be able to be strong in all areas because of the season of life you're in? Or do you not look at it that way?
I think that you can't necessarily improve the other pillars in the season of life that you're in. I think you can put them in maintenance mode. I have a beautiful relationship with my husband. I love him very much, but there are days where we just talk in the morning and we just talk at night because I love him, but we're good. Like everything is cool. We're focused on the business. We're focused on, our son. We're focused on whatever Afrotech or festival or thing that the business is launching right then. So I'm okay with something going on maintenance mode. The real question is, do you know when to switch pillars? Like, do you know when something's been in maintenance too long, where it's actually not advancing at all on its own? There's no compounding interest, no passive return from you putting it in maintenance mode. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, that's where they mess up. They take their eye off the ball for too long on some of the other pillars.
Ooh, that's good to know. I love that. I love that concept. Maintenance mode, but don't ignore it. Don't let it
Yeah,
go on too long.
that's right.
Okay. So something that I really love about your message is how you approach building a business with intention, especially when it comes to budgeting and cutting costs and staying scrappy in seasons of growth. So my audience will really eat this up because you've mastered the art of doing more with less. So can you share some of like the smartest, most impactful things that you've done financially or operationally when money was tight, but the vision was big? Because you're talking to a lot of people right now where money is tight, but the vision is big.
Right. So on the personal side, I think what's important is to understand the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich means that you are accumulating cash, you're accumulating things, a lot of things that are external validators. Being wealthy means that you have the ability to use money as a tool to improve your life and to improve your joy every single day. And more people need to switch from being rich to being wealthy in order to actually maximize how they're using their discretionary income or their income at all. So, for example, I don't have a car. People think I'm nuts.
In Nashville?
In
Really?
Nashville, in LA, I did not have a car, Amy,
Okay. Tell me
because
more.
the lack of freedom that I was going to have having a car, having to drive around everywhere, sit in traffic all the time and energy, it would have allowed me to make choices about where I lived that was disconnected from work. So it was like, okay, well, you can live in the valley or you can live in these places, but your office is here. You're losing all this time every day. And time was what I valued the most. So I moved 2 blocks, 3 blocks from the office. It had higher rent, but it also had a gym. So I didn't have a gym membership because I included it in my apartment. I walked every day. So I was super fit. I could go to the grocery store and just pick up healthy food. I wasn't eating out as much as I would if I had lived out in the burbs and didn't have enough time to cook. So, there's a way to look at your spending, whether you have a lot of money or you don't, and figure out what are the things that actually bring you joy and what are the things that don't bring you joy. So I call this my wealth quadrant basically. So it's high joy, low joy, high cost, cost. Okay. So things that are high cost and high joy, you save for. That's your vacations, maybe it's your wedding. It could be, all that stuff that, you might need to spend some money and save for.
That's high cost, high joy. Okay.
Right. We spend a lot of time thinking about that bucket, right? Like that's what makes it to Instagram. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Then there's high cost, low joy. That's potentially your mortgage. That's potentially your car. That's potentially the graduate degree you got 10 years ago that you don't use. Okay. That bucket, we got to minimize that bucket. And we should look at it. We should look at it and say, hey, should I get an apartment? This house that I bought that I actually don't even enjoy, should I rent my house and live in an apartment. Like it's when you really start to question the things that society might say, well, that's weird. Why did she do that? Okay. Then you have my favorite bucket, which is high joy, low cost.
Yes, what's in that one? I want
Oh,
that
so
one.
many things. My very mediocre garden in the backyard right now. I've got one side is thriving because a sprinkler can reach it, and another side that's like quite,
Sounds like what would be at my house. Yeah.
yeah. But like my basil, my thyme, I have lemon mint leaves that I'm growing, and I make my own tea and like my little dehydrator air fryer situation. So much joy, very low cost.
Okay. I like that. I feel as though if we had a lot of those, our life would be wonderful.
Yeah. And I think for more people, we chase the high joy, high cost bucket,
Agree.
and we
Yeah.
get drained by the high cost, low joy bucket. And I would just encourage people to it's not about making more money necessarily, but it is about using the money that you do have in a way that is a reflection of the life and the values that you have, not how you're being perceived by everybody else.
That reminds me so often, I don't know if we really know what we really want. Because if we really sat down, and I've done this exercise recently, like, what do you want to create a beautiful life? It's actually probably less than I even thought I needed to get there, especially just as the world seems crazy and I just want to slow down. And I was telling you how we bought this property in Nashville. I hope I don't become a hermit because I could also see myself going on this property and never coming off
You
of
might.
it. So I know we never know, but I really do think anyone listening, taking like the next time you journal, taking 20 minutes and just being like, what do I want? And it might mean that you don't need to work as hard to get that. You don't need to do all the hustling. You don't need to be chasing millions and millions of dollars in your business. And that is a beautiful thing.
That's the definition of freedom, Amy, is like,
That's
oh my
it.
gosh, I don't need like why was I aiming for this thing? At one point I was like really focused on selling the company. I write this in the last chapter of the book. I was like, I was crying, I was stressed. I had my first panic attack because it was so counterintuitive to what my body wanted to do, but it was like the next natural thing. It was the only way that I could figure out how to get out of this burnout and this responsibility that I had. And as I went through the process, which took way too long, I realized, wait, I can keep this company. I can still be the leader of this company and do it under my own rules. And I'm trying to sell this thing because that's what we're taught in Silicon Valley that, you build a company for 5 to 7 years and then you sell it. And you give your money back to the investors. That's what we're trained to do. And I'm like, but why? Why must I do that?
Yes. Why can't I just create it on my terms and keep it going the way I want it to go? Yeah, there's power in that. So I told some of my students that I'd be interviewing you. And one of them had a question that she's like, please, please, please ask this one. So I'm going to read it to you. Okay. She says, when you were scaling from startup to an established business, how did you figure out which revenue streams were worth doubling down on and which ones to cut? I'm seeing multiple opportunities, but have limited bandwidth. And I thought this was such a smart question. I think a lot of my listeners, they have a lot of opportunities coming their way, but they just aren't sure what to double down on and what to cut bait on. So what would you say to that?
Yeah. So that quadrant I just walked through, high joy, low joy, turn it to high profit, low profit, high effort, low effort. Okay. So in the beginning of your business, when you don't have that much time because you are the CEO, the administrator, you're everything. Okay. Then you have to figure out what is low effort, but high profit. And that then allows you to reinvest that profit in the things that you want to continue to do that maybe take a little bit longer to get off the ground, that have a longer maybe return on investment over time, but it requires investment along the way. I think a lot of people want to jump straight to, well, we're going to be this big thing and let me build that big product. But you spend a lot of time and effort and energy and money getting there. And so it feels like you're just treading water. And when I talk to entrepreneurs and I look at their finances and I say, okay, well, walk me through which product makes the most and which one's the easiest for you to do. It is always the boring thing that they don't want to do. That's not sexy. It's not the thing that, they got out of bed to say that they were going to do that day. And I'm like, okay, let's do that for a little bit. Let's stack the bank account and let's use those profits to reinvest in something else that buys your time back so that you can continue to build your business.
Okay, I love that you said this because, as you know, I teach people how to create and launch courses. And it's not just about that. My model really is you take that course, you launch it again and again and again, and you get better each time, but you're doing the same thing. You're a dog with a bone again and again and again. And I know that's not super sexy. And when you're talking to a creative, they can get bored easily, but dang, it works. And it's allowed me to do some pretty amazing things beyond that because the money was there.
That's right.
So,
And Amy, I have to tell you, I've been listening to your podcast for since like the beginning, like a
oh
long,
my
long
gosh,
time,
love
very
that.
long time. And I have a course. I followed your world. I had a course, and I built a membership, and then now I have a Patreon version of it, and I do completely agree with like, you've got that thing, you've got that cow, you milk it, because then you can refine it every single day. You can refine it every time you talk to someone. If you're constantly changing products, there's a learning curve every time you launch a new product. I see this in my business. When Afrotech, which is huge, 35, 40,000 people at Afrotech, when we switch cities, we lose money because we make mistakes. We're in a new city. You're learning a new city. You're learning new, making new relationships with politicians. You're making new relationships with the convention center. You have new vendors. You have new costs that are unexpected. So moving every year is a bad business decision, even though if we feel like it's boring, it's like, no, we're going to stay in this city. We're in Houston right now. We're going to stay in Houston for a bit because it is good for business. It then allows everyone who says, okay, well, I know the roadmap of this. Now I can go focus on something else. But if every year we're burning all that learning energy on the same thing, how does the business move forward?
Amen. I'm totally with you there. One of the lessons I learned early on is if you continue to reinvent the wheel, everything you're doing in your business feels like you're starting over, like talking to the new politicians and the new city council and all of that. You are slowing yourself down. And so I do think it's not as fun all the time, but you know what is fun? Freedom
Yeah,
and
cash.
being able, yeah, cash is fun. So yeah, it's just a little tweak in your mindset. So I think someone needed to hear that today. Like, wait a second, go back to the basics of what really works and spend more time there. Yes, I think you and I are both a great example of that. Talk to me about Patreon though, because that's not something I teach, nor do I know a lot about it, but I actually subscribe to two of them. So why did you go there and what does that look like? Like, tell my audience kind of what you've got there.
Yeah, let me tell you my journey because I think it's helpful. So I started with the course, very much used your framework where I just like DM'd people and said, hey, I'm going to run a group coaching call like once a week over a period of time. And this is the PayPal link, like sign up.
Cool. Scrappy. I like it.
Yeah, MVP. Everybody signed up and then I recorded the calls, took all the questions and all my answers. And that was like the baseline of my curriculum, which I call Work Smart. And I had so much fun doing it. Like it was so much fun. I learned so much. Then cohort 2, I said, okay, now we've got the landing page. We're on Kajabi. We ran the funnels. This was still back in the day when Facebook ads were like fantastic and it was kind of easy to launch. I think it's much harder to launch today than it was back then. And then fast forward, it grew a lot. My wait list was getting really long. And so I was like, you know what? One of the things that I'm noticing is that people are learning a lot from each other in these group coaching calls. I would love to facilitate that more. So we moved to Circle and we built out our community in Circle. And I had a amazing program manager, Jasmine, who did office hours every week. And I did a call every 2 weeks. And it was great, but it felt like they really just wanted me. And at the time of the business, I didn't have enough time to give them what they needed. I also felt like a broken record. Like I felt like I was saying the same thing over and over again and that I wasn't able to spend enough time with them for them to actually like grasp and apply the concepts. They could grasp it, but applying it was really difficult.
Yeah.
And so I felt like, okay, this is where I actually started to doubt myself. I was like, well, maybe the curriculum isn't right. Like maybe these frameworks aren't the right frameworks. Like, so I paused. I was like, let me just be done. If I can't get the results for these people that I want, like I'm going to be out for a bit. Then everyone was like, when are you opening back up? I was like, "Oh,
Like, oh
these
no.
guys are killing me." And then I heard you and Stu, and I was like, "Okay, all right. I gotta figure out a model that makes this work for me." So we moved to Patreon, and I've really enjoyed Patreon because it's not a community like circle where there is a lot of all this community elements that you have to do and really try to upkeep all of this chatter, and which I didn't have the capacity and I don't have the capacity to do it, but it does allow for a more simple framework where I just post information. So I'll say, "Hey, here's 5 grants that I've found that are good for entrepreneurs," or, "Hey, we just went to Blavity Fest. Here's the behind the scenes video," or, "Hey, here's some stocks that I'm rebalancing my portfolio." It seems like and it feels like it's more of a reflection of it doesn't have to be as structured. Like on Tuesdays we do this, on Wednesdays we do this. No. We still have our monthly call and it's so fun. I call it all hands, but it has given me a lot more freedom to not feel as much pressure of the like structure of the community, which I think some of the other membership platforms really require for it to be lively and energetic. The only thing I will say is that Patreon is adding a lot of features, so they're adding like lives and different things. I'm not quite sure how much they're going to be able to keep up because Substack's also growing quite a bit. So that's my only other thing that's like on my horizon is like, should we move to Substack?
How much do people pay you?
They pay me $30 a month if they want the monthly call, and then a lower tier like $4.99 if they just want the community. And we have over 1,000 members.
That's great.
It's
And
great.
remind everybody what you're teaching in that.
So I'm teaching them the work smart principles. So, which is very much in my book. So, like how to optimize your life. We talk a lot about AI. I show them all my tech stacks. We talk about business and how to grow your business, your income. And it is effectively how to rewrite your rules of your life using the different frameworks that are in your book, but applied every single day.
Fascinating. There's just so many different ways to get your digital programs of however they are out there in the world. So I'm glad you talked about that. We've never talked about Patreon here. So people might want to just go check it out and see if that's something. And Substack, you're right, is totally growing quickly. So there's a lot of options there. Okay, I want to take a little bit of a turn because another area that my audience is asking questions about a lot is how do I find a coach? How do I find a mentor? And so I would love for you to share how you've intentionally built support in the form of mentors and coaches and advisors around you, and what you look for when you're deciding on who gets a seat at your table. You may be paying them or whatever, but you're choosing who's there.
Yeah, there is a big difference between a coach, a mentor, and an advisor. And I think that a lot of people need to
Break that
really
down.
they need to understand that in order to make a decision on what's best for them in their situation. So most women and people of color are over mentored, Amy. Like we don't have a problem getting a
Interesting.
mentor. We've got
Okay.
the person that we went to high school with and our college teacher and our pastor and all these mentors who want to give us advice. Mentors are great. Mentors are like emotional support people, right? Like you can call them, they listen, they maybe don't have any expertise in what you're asking about, but they're a good person to call for a stability conversation.
Good sounding board.
Great sounding board. However, they aren't qualified to give the advice that they're giving. They make you feel better.
Right, right. That's a good point.
This
Yes.
is critical. Okay. A advisor and a coach, these are people who have experience doing and getting to the level that you want to get to. And these people are the ones who are actually going to be able to change your life in a way that allows you to accomplish your goal and your dream. I think more people need to find the advisors and coaches in their lives for all functions. So this could be wellness, this could be attached to any of the pillars, money, wellness, stability, this could be your therapist. That is a certified advisor, right? You are a certified advisor. And for me, I have really sought to find more advisors because what has happened is that when I find someone who has already done what I want to do, for me, it feels huge. It feels like this big, hairy, audacious goal, this thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around. I'm like, I want to get to this end outcome, but it feels overwhelming. And no one in my peer group or my friend group has been there. So it's not like I can go ask them. None of my mentors even know what the heck I'm talking about. And then you go to this advisor, this coach, and they're like, oh, yeah, like that's normal. because for them, they've seen it 100 times over. And I'm sure this happens to you all the time when someone's like, of course, this feels so overwhelming. And you're like, no, not overwhelming. I do this every day.
So true.
The one that was really eye opening for me that I write about in the book is my financial advisor. I thought that I was doing really, really well. I had kind of hit these milestones in my personal life as a single entrepreneur. And I went to my financial advisor with like a pretty big ego. I was like, here are my results. What do I
Look
need
at
to do?
me. Yes.
Like, give me a pat on the back. And he was like, this is okay. But like, this is the beginning of a bigger stepping stone. And like, here's what this next phase of your life looks like. And here's the things that you need to do. He was the person who helped me figure out how to get a mortgage as an entrepreneur, which is really difficult to do.
It is. Yes.
Very
So
difficult.
true.
He helped me figure out, okay, like you don't have a trust. What are you doing? Like you don't have these LLCs set up right. So I thought I was walking in because to my peer group, I'm a star, but I'm like the brokest person that he manages. So,
Yeah.
and you
So
want
good.
that. You
Yes.
want to be
Yes,
the
you
brokest
do.
person, or you want to be the weakest link of your advisor or your coach, because it means that the capacity for learning and getting you to the next level is that much greater.
Yes. So true. I'm all about the advisors and coaches. I want to touch back a little bit about women tend to have enough or maybe too many mentors. You said that and I was like, huh. I'm like, oh yeah. Especially when I was in my 20s and 30s with less confidence, I let everybody mentor me. And so, what have you seen and what's like a red flag that maybe women's especially should look out for around all these people speaking into your life?
Mentors have a special place, but sometimes mentors are just a mirror. They're just reflecting you back what you want to see. And again, at times that might be okay, but more often than not, if you're looking to make a change in your life, you need someone who's going to tell you the truth,
The tough
not
love.
just something that's going to make you feel better about yourself. And it's a personality. Some people don't want that tough feedback. Some people do just want a warm hug. And I love that for them. But if you're listening to this podcast, that's probably not you.
Yeah,
You
it's so
probably want to
true.
keep growing. You want that tough love. You want somebody to say, hey, I see a lot of effort here. I think you're doing a great job, but here's the gaps that I see. And here's some ways. Let's walk through how to get to the next level. That is really, really important. A mentor, they're not incentivized to do that at all. They're incentivized to have a long relationship with you where everybody feels good about that relationship.
Yeah. I want everyone listening, men and women, to ask yourself, do you have guidance in your life right now where someone will call you out on your BS or someone will say like, yeah, I see you made effort here, but this isn't good enough. If you want to get here, let me tell you the things that you need to do, kind of like your financial advisor. And more than likely, you're paying for this coach or this advisor. And so 99% of the time you are. And I know that many of my listeners aren't ready to invest at that level, but it is something to keep in your back pocket because it's one of the best investments you could ever make is to find an advisor or a coach. And it doesn't always have to be one-on-one, especially when you're kind of easing into it and starting to make money. But I love that you just point that out because I bring it up, Morgan, because I think I'm a people pleaser and I respect a lot of people's opinions. And my husband will sometimes say like, we'll be at dinner and this wackadoo is giving you all this advice. You make way more than him. You're sitting there, you're just like, And he's like, this is kind of probably about 10 years ago, but he's like, I see it all the time. I mean, it's driving me crazy. And I thought, that's interesting, where I let everyone kind of just speak into me versus being really selective of who I invite to my table to give me the advising.
That's right. And if you're in a season or a situation where you don't have that discretionary income to hire that advisor or that coach, I don't think you can underestimate the Rolodex that we have. A lot of people in our lives, we went to high school, we went to college with them, and we look at them a certain way because we're like, that's Jimmy from college 10 years ago. But Jimmy's a senior director at the company that he works at in paid marketing. So maybe there's a way that you can barter with your friend Jimmy and say, hey, Jimmy, can you give me some advisorship for, just a few weeks? I'm trying to solve this problem. And in exchange, you're going to get this amazing sourdough bread
Yes, there you go.
or whatever offering you have. Okay. I remember when I was too broke, this was back when the Facebook ads thing was like really, really doing well. And I was like, I just couldn't figure out the cash flow of the Facebook ads to the courses. And I have a girlfriend and I said, hey, can you run these ads for me? But you can be in the cohort because she was trying to figure out how to grow her agency and her business. It was a great trade.
Yes. I love that. They're absolutely look for the trades because there are many of them out there. I love that. Okay, I want to ask you about your sabbatical because I know you took a sabbatical and that's where you realized that success was costing more than it was giving you. So talk to me about why you decided to take the sabbatical. What did it look like and what did you realize?
I recommend that everybody try to find a time to take a sabbatical if they can.
How long? What kind of length are we talking?
I think it depends on people, but ideally 2 weeks, if at a minimum. So I did a 30-day sabbatical, but 2 weeks would be my minimum because the first week you're still working, so you need at least a 1 week to rest.
Agree.
A sabbatical is different than a vacation, so I wanna make that clarification because people are like, "I go on vacation for 2 weeks all the time." That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about filling it up with, selfies on a beach. That's not what we're talking about. A sabbatical is a period of time where you are resting and relaxing so that you can think and dream up the next phase of your life, so that you
That's
can
very different.
be creative. It's very, very different, and it inspires you. It doesn't just recharge you, it inspires you to the next level of whatever your life is gonna be, and you don't go into it saying, "I'm gonna spend 30 days writing my book." That's not a sabbatical, okay?
So true.
It is because we're all high achievers here, so we'll be like, "This is my plan for my sabbatical." On week 1, no.
Oh yeah, totally in my audience for sure. And me.
Yes, it needs to be an open space of play and creativity and freedom. So during COVID, when I was, I just made it through one of the hardest years of pivoting the business. I called myself a wartime CEO because we were really at war with the economy. And then George Floyd was murdered. So then my business took a bit of a tailspin because it's, the world was crashing around us with COVID. And there was this kind of heightened focus on equity and Black audiences. So we had our best quarter ever in Q3, but our worst quarter ever in Q2. It was this crazy time. And so we made it through that. And so in November, I said, your girl is out. I'm done. I'm tapped out. I'm done. I need to rest. I need to reimagine what this life is going to look like because I did not enjoy that phase. And this was when I started to say, I'm out. You guys, I did it. It's done. I'm proving this to no one. You can have this company. So I went on sabbatical with two of my girlfriends to Costa Rica and we spent 30 days just playing, existing. I remember we went out to dinner in this cute little restaurant in the town, and the guy was just him and his dad, and they were like, "We caught this fish this morning." And I said, "Oh, can I go fishing with you tomorrow?" And he said, "Yeah." So we went out on a fishing boat and caught our dinner and all this tuna, and I get
So
seasick. Yeah,
fun.
so fun. Just really just time to rethink what I wanted to do, and I journaled every day. And as a part of that experience, I realized this was when I needed to make a change. So I broke my lease in LA. I was living at Hermosa Beach and I moved right after that sabbatical. I moved into my parents' house and worked from their closet for a few weeks, few
Oh my
months
gosh.
while I was trying to figure out what I was doing in Nashville. And I just completely rewrote all of the rules of what I was living by. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to, put myself in a position to meet a man where I could live a life that with someone else. And I didn't feel like California or LA was that place for me. So, you know, a sabbatical sometimes tells you things you weren't expecting. I did not go into my sabbatical thinking I'm moving and leaving California.
Isn't that wild? Your life is so different. You moved just a few years ago. You've got this new amazing man, a son, a baby on the way, a new book, a thriving business. It is kind of crazy how life could change so quickly in the most beautiful way.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, that is how life works if you let it.
If you let it, that's what I was just going to say. If you let it. So someone's listening right now and they're white knuckling everything they're doing, every decision they're making, and instead you let go. You took 30 days to just be, and look what happened. Like so many different things happened in your life. So I love that you mentioned that. I love that you talk about it in your book because I think it's so incredibly important. So thank you for that. I do have one final question before we wrap up though. Okay. So if you could whisper just one thing into the ear of every high functioning, or I should say over functioning entrepreneur, probably mostly women, but over functioning entrepreneur listening right now, what would you say?
I'd say everybody doesn't care as much as you think they do.
Oh, tell me more about that. You're so right.
I think that, again, I've said it a few times during this show and this episode, we have become obsessed mentally with being perceived and how it looks. And we think everyone is watching. No one is watching. No one is
They
thinking
don't
about
care.
They don't
They're
care.
thinking of themselves.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
just like
even if
we
they
are.
are thinking, they're thinking in relation to themselves. They're projecting their thoughts as it relates to them, not necessarily you. So really, really seek to understand what you want. And it sounds simple, but it is not easy. It sounds simple, but it is not easy to truly be someone who lives in peace with your own choices and lives your life for your own rules. And I would just really whisper in your ear and be that person on your shoulder and say, nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Just do you. No one cares. And if they do, I love that you said it's through their own lens. So it's totally swayed anyway. So you're never going to get that 100% honest just about what they think about you. So don't worry about it. I love that's what your message is because it's so very important. Morgan, I'm so glad you came on the show and I'm very, very glad you wrote this book, Rewrite the Rules. So tell everybody, where should they go, one, to learn more about you, your podcast, where to find the book, all the good stuff.
Yeah, you can go to morgandebaun.com to connect with me, to join the community if you'd like. I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, and see how we can help you. And you can get the book anywhere you listen or read books. Rewrite Your Rules.
So morgandebaun.com. Tell everyone how to spell your last name.
DEB as in boy, AUN.com.
Perfect. I'll put it in my show notes as well. Thank you so very much for being here and congratulations on the success of the book.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.